First thing we want to fix, you can see that we have this interesting shading here. And to fix that, just tab into edit mode, change this to a median point. We're going to select this vertex here, and we want to be selecting it on this spoke that's straight up and down. So if you want, go into side view with 3, and you want to select the vertex in this area and then press period on the number pad, because we're going to be mirroring this and rotating it again, so we only need to fix this because it's inside of this area. So we're just going to fix this one. So the problem here is this is too far out in comparison to these other vertices. So we want to just grab it on the x-axis, hold control, and snap it to this middle point. And that will help to correct the shading in that area. So that's the first problem fixed. I also notice we have 3 vertices down here. We can just select all 3, Alt-M at center, and get rid of those. The other problem we were going to fix is the fact that this comes to a point rather than looking more rounded. So to fix that, you're going to switch to 3D cursor for your pivot point, and you just want to select the vertices that have a similar angle, like these, maybe all these have a similar angle, and then do S, Shift and X to exclude the x-axis, and then you can adjust them to your liking. And you can do the same down in this area if you'd like to as well. Just do S, Shift and X, and adjust them as necessary. And the reason you're doing Shift and X is because these are at a different X value, and if you were to not do that, they would change their X value. So you want to make sure you do S, Shift, and then X. I'm just going to adjust my model here, and I may do a time lapse of it, because the changes that I'm going to need to make may be different than the changes that you need to make. So just use the same method with a S, Shift, and X with the pivot point at 3D cursor, and just go until you get something that you like. Try to smooth out the curvature on all of these curves, and then we will move on to the next part. So now you should have this area smoothed out at least from here to this point, because we only need to go until this point. So you should have all this area smoothed out and looking the way that you want it, so that when we duplicate and rotate it, it will turn out the way that you want. So now that that's done, we want to make sure we're in edit mode, switch this to median point, Alt and right click on this center edge loop. And I did look at some references to get a better idea of how far back this goes, and it actually goes quite far back. Like something like this, although it may seem extreme, is actually more accurate when looking at other pictures of this type of rim. It actually does go quite a bit back, so just increase the distance if you need to on yours to be similar to this. And then we're going to press 3 to go to side view, and Z for wireframe. This rim is a little different than the last one. It may look like this is the rim center cover like we made before. However, on this rim, I'm just going to hide this rim for a second so we can look at the picture. But on this rim, this entire area from here all the way down to here is actually one piece, and the only thing that's a separate piece is this center emblem and the black part that's around it. The rest of this is actually all one solid metal piece. So the center cap is just this center black part, and the rest needs to be physically connected. So with that being said, I'm going to unhide my rim with Alt-H and go back to edit mode, and we want to create the rest of this down to the center cap. So we're going to do E to extrude, right click to cancel, S to scale this down a little. That'll give us that shading towards the outside. And then we want to do E to extrude, right click to cancel, S to scale it down some more, and try to get the size approximately the same as the outer part of this cap here. So when you're done, you should have something like this. To make this cap, since it's a different object or a separate object, we're going to do Shift D and then right click to cancel. It's going to duplicate these vertices and make them totally separate. And then I'm going to just slightly bring them out a little. When you're clicking and dragging on this red arrow, you can hold Shift to move it more slowly, and that may help you position this a bit better if you do it that way instead. You just want to move it out slightly away from the other vertices, and then you can do E to extrude, right click to cancel, and bring it back slightly. Then we can do select linked, Shift H, Alt right click on this edge here, press F, select linked, Control N to recalculate the normals, Alt H to unhide everything, tab to edit mode, and turn on smooth shading. So now we can see our centerpiece. Go to face select, select this face, and we can probably do a bevel. We can just do Control B, or we could have done an inset instead. I'm just going to mouse wheel up once so we have 3 loops and see how this looks. So that looks alright to me. That's going to be our center cap for this rim. So now that everything's looking good, before we add in the holes, let's just save this. So go to File and Save. Another option for this center cap is to press Tab, select the center, and then press I to inset, and that will give you a flatter center cap. I actually think it is flat in the real world, so this is probably more accurate, but if you like the look of the other type, then you can stick with the other type, I guess. So now we're going to press 3 to go to side view, Z for wireframe, and we're going to create a circle. So go to create circle. Just make sure you're in object mode when you do this. Create circle. Change the vertex count to 16 and press enter. Tab into edit mode, R, Y, and then 90 to rotate around the y-axis 90 degrees. Switch to vertex select. Make sure you're still on median point for your pivot point. S to scale it down and drag it up on the z-axis. Drag it straight up. We're going to be using this to make our holes, but we're actually going to make it here in the center rather than off to the left. It's not really going to matter which spoke we use because they're all the same. If we had just rotated this image over so that this circle was over here instead, it would be the same result. So we can just pretend that the circle is over here because it's easier for mirroring and duplicating and rotating if the circle is centered like this. So you just want to try to match the diameter or the radius of this as best you can. And then what I'd like to do is try to get this point basically on this line so that we can merge the points together. It may create 2 points on this line when we do this cut, so we may need to merge the points once we're done doing the cut. So just do your best to get it on that line and get the radius correct. Once you're done with that, you also want to move it away from the rim just to make sure that it's far enough away from the rim so that you don't have any problems. And then you're going to tab to object mode. This should still be selected, the circle should still be selected. Shift and right click on the rim, 3 for side view, tab into edit mode, go to tools, and choose knife project. And you can also do cut through. For whatever reason I'm getting some problems here, so I'm going to do Control Z and try it again. So all I did was change my view by mouse wheeling in, and it gave me the correct result this time. So now what we want to do is press tab to go to object mode, select the circle, and press H to hide it since we're done with it. Select the rim, tab into edit mode, go to vertex select. Now we just want to check to make sure that we only have one point here. So we're going to take this point, shift select this point, Alt M at last. And you want to check over here to make sure that there really is only one point. In my case, there is only one point. And then on the left side, you want to do the same thing. Merge these two together. Make sure you have only one point here. And you could also do the same for the rest of these points that are crossing over. I'm just selecting the point, G to grab, and then once I'm satisfied that there's only one point, right click to put the point, right click to cancel the movement. So that's how you check to make sure that you only have one point on each of these spots. Everything looks good, so now we're going to go to face select and start selecting these faces that are inside the circle. I to inset, do a small inset. E to extrude, right click to cancel. S, X, and then 0 to flatten it out on the X axis, and then press enter. And bring this back to give it whatever depth you feel is appropriate. And then one more time we're going to inset by pressing I and again doing a small inset. You will notice some shading problems here, and that's just because we have some n-gons. So that's the next thing is going to be to fix those. So we're going to go to vertex select. These points can be merged over to the left. So we're going to select this one, shift select this one, Alt M at last. And then repeat the whole process all the way down the line. We don't have to do the left side because this left side is not going to be used. We're going to be mirroring this right side again. So we can ignore the left side at this point. This point here needs to stay there because it's part of this outer circle here, so we can't get rid of this. We could, however, potentially get rid of this one by merging it down to here. So I'm going to try that with Alt M and choosing at last, merging it down to here, and then continuing to get rid of any unnecessary points. And then we can do Control R, left click and drag this up so that we can meet it up with this point. And we'll join these two by selecting them and pressing J to join. And then Control R and do the same down here. Match it up with this. Select these two, J to join. And that will give us better shading on this side. Just ignore this side because it's not going to be used. So you only want to look on this side to see if you are happy with the shading. And I think it looks okay. Relatively satisfied with that. So we need to fix this N-gon, so we're going to select this point, shift select this point, J to join. And down here, we need to get rid of these points too. We can actually merge this one up to here since this is a straight line. So we can select this one, shift select this one, Alt M at last, and then repeat the process with Shift R until you get rid of all those points. And if we want to, we can take this point, shift select this one, and J to join to get rid of that N-gon. And select this one, shift select this one, J to join. That will give us two quads here. I'm just making sure everything looks okay. And it looks reasonably okay. The only thing we may want to do is add in another loop cut here to try to improve the shading and get rid of this triangle part. I just did Control R, dragged it up, and then we could possibly take the knife cut tool, left click here, drag it across these two, left click again. When it's on this line, press enter. And that does improve the shading a bit, so I'm going to keep that. So we're going to select these 2 points, Q to slide them up slightly, in my case. And then we're going to need to take this point, this innermost point, and bring it down. We can probably just join it right here. So we can select this one and press J. Although the results, well, I guess that's okay. But I think actually what I want to do is just press K again. Left click on this point and bring it down all the way, and left click on this line here, and then press enter. And the reason I did that is so that we can still do a loop cut on the inside with Control R. So I'm going to take this point and possibly join it to this one just to get rid of the N-gon that was there. So the shading on this inside is not the best. I think if we do Control R and then bring this up, that may help a little. And you could possibly do the same on the bottom. And that does seem to improve the shading some. And I think we should select these and Q to slide them over. to get them further away from this other point, and then possibly slide these over as well with G twice so that there's a more gradual transition. I think, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So that's not perfect, but it is better, I think. We can ignore the fact that there's this shading problem in the center because this other line is going to get removed. So you really only want to look on this right side. That's going to be the indicator of how things are going to look once we're done. And perhaps we can slide these over, or slide that one over, to get some better shading, hopefully, or to try to get better shading. I think I'm relatively happy with that. The next thing we need to do is to duplicate these and rotate it around so that all of our changes will be finalized. It's going to be a little tricky since this is actually the mirror diagonal line and our circle extends beyond that. So we're going to have to use a slightly different method. It's basically the same, except we need to preserve this part of the circle. And it goes beyond this line, so it's going to be a little trickier, but we can do it. So the center line, we're going to keep that, of course. And I'm actually going to hide this centerpiece, so go to Face Select, select this. Do Select Linked and H to hide that. Go to Vertex Select, Alt right click. Continue doing Alt and Shift, and then right click to select more vertices. So just Alt and Shift and right click until you get all the way to the top. And also don't forget, you need to press Z and Alt and Shift and right click on this center one, which is actually down here, so we need that one too. Then we can press H to hide. So you shouldn't have any vertices on this center line at all. The next thing we want to preserve is actually, we want to preserve this line here because it actually contains some of this loop cut information that we're going to need to preserve in order to make this part of the spoke accurate, since this goes beyond the halfway point. So we're going to Alt right click and we want to hide this, so press H to hide that. And I believe we want to Alt and right click on this, and then Alt and Shift right click on this, so we have our diagonal now, which also needs to be preserved, and press H to hide that. So we have two separate pieces we actually want to keep at this point. We want to keep the rest of the circle, and we want to keep this here as well. So we're going to select one vertex on this piece, Shift select one on this other piece that we want to keep, select linked, H to hide, A to select everything. And if you haven't yet, you do want to save because we're going to be deleting these and you don't want to mess anything up. So I've already saved it. If you haven't, you may want to save at this point before you delete anything. Then we're going to press delete, choose vertices, Alt-H to unhide everything. We can hide this circle, so we can select a point on it, do select linked, H to hide. So we want to press A to select everything, and we can change this to 3D cursor, do Shift D to duplicate, right click to cancel, S, Y, and then -1. Press enter, A twice, W, remove doubles, Control N to recalculate the normals. So now we have our full circle. But if we were to duplicate and rotate this by the correct value, you'll notice we have another circle here which we don't want. So instead of doing that, we're just going to duplicate and rotate this upper part and not the circle. So I believe we can just select these upper points, everything like this, and do H to hide them, and then select one of these points on this bottom piece, do select linked, H to hide that as well. So now we have only the top piece. Press A to select it, Shift D, R24, and press enter. A twice, W, remove doubles, Alt H to unhide this. And now we need to fill in the areas that are empty. So we want this to continue down to here, so we're going to select these two and these two, press F. And then select these four, press F, and select these four and press F. So now we have this full area here. If everything turned out correctly, you can just save it by going to File, Save. We can see now that we need to get this part of the spoke over to this area somehow. So to do that, we're going to press Tab, and we're going to Alt right click on this edge loop here, and then press H to hide that. Alt right click on this edge loop, press H to hide that as well. Since we have this center thing here, we need to hide some of these vertices. So we're going to select some of these, H to hide those. We can hide this centerpiece, do select linked, H to hide that. We want to keep this diagonal, but we don't want to keep anything that's connected to it. So we're going to select all the stuff that's connected to it and press H to hide that. Now we can select one of these points and do select linked. Assuming everything was done correctly, you should have this piece isolated from the rest of it. Then you can do Shift D, R -48, and press enter. 24 would have been for one rotation, and this is two rotations, so you just double it. And now you can do Alt H to unhide everything. Select one of these, do select linked, H to hide the center because we don't want to mess up the centerpiece. A to select everything, W, remove doubles. One thing I actually didn't realize is we're going to need the rest of this halfway over to here as well. So it would normally be tricky to bring the rest of this over because we don't have a clean edge. We don't have one of these that's not connected to this circle. But an easy way to do it, since we already made these lines into complete circles, is just Alt right click here, or actually select this point, hold Control, select this point, and then click on spin. We want the angle to be 24 and the number of steps to be 2. And you'll notice it gave us this extra line here, as well as the one we're going to need over here. So that only worked because we made this circular previously, and then we were able to use the spin tool with our cursor at the center still, because it uses the cursor as the spin point, and we were able to recreate that section of the rim even though we deleted it without thinking. And we do want to make this into a face because it's actually a hole right now, so we're going to select these 4 and press F, select these 4 and press F. Now we need to get the rest of this spoke. To do that, we're going to Alt right click on this edge, Alt and Shift right click on this, Alt and Shift right click on this, press Z for wireframe, Alt and Shift right click to get this center edge. Now we need to get the rest of these, and it's easier to just do it manually. So press Z to go to wireframe, C for circle select, and start selecting all the rest of these vertices that were between here and here. Just be careful and make sure you get all of them. Then we need to go down here and do something similar. Get all the vertices that are to the left of that line. And we also want to get these down to this point so that we have this area like this. Then Shift D, R24, press Enter, A twice, W, remove doubles. And now we actually have exactly what we're going to need to create the rest of the rim. So in edit mode, we can select everything with A, Shift D, R72 this time, because we have 3 spokes. Press Enter, and now just do Shift R a couple of times until you have the whole rim. A twice, W, remove doubles, and after more work than probably was necessary, we now have a nice completed rim. So we can save this. One thing we could add to this is actually this center part gets pulled back more, or more towards the car. So if we take a look, even though in this picture it's basically impossible to see it, or it's really hard to see it, but at approximately this distance, anything that's inside this radius actually would be pulled more towards the center of the car. So this inner area will be pulled this way. So if we want to make this more realistic, we're going to select the rim, 3 for side view, tab to edit mode, A to deselect, we're going to need to add in some edge loops. So we're going to do Control R, left click, and then right click. And then do the same thing for each spoke. Do Control R, left click, right click. Now that that is done, we're just going to do it this way. So now we're going to press Z for wireframe and select all of these loop cuts that we just made. I just used circle select and went around in a circle, selecting all of the points. Then you can do Q to edge slide and bring it in closer. I'm just checking the reference. Okay, so we want it about here. And that is about there. So we can do H now to hide those. And by hiding it, we've isolated this center part. So we can select one of the points here, do select linked. And drag this back some. And then you can do Alt H. And that may be a little too far. I'm going to see if I can do Control minus. That's going to get the centerpiece by itself again. And I think, yeah, it does have the entire center part. So now we can just manipulate this until we are happy with it. So something like that is probably relatively accurate. I think that's fairly close. So another thing you can do is you notice it's now more of a jagged edge here. And I also just noticed that some of these edge loops did not get pulled down correctly. So we may have to do the duplication and rotation process again, which is fine. But for now, what we're going to do is select these here, just to make sure we have enough. Just make sure you're in wireframe, do C for circle select. And to get rid of this jaggedness, we can just do Control B and create a bit of a bevel. And that's going to make that part of the rim look a bit nicer. You could even undo that, do Control B and increase the number of loops by doing just by mouse wheeling up. And then you will end up with a smoother curve and a nicer result. But I think I'm going to maybe adjust this back a little and then do my bevel until I get a curve that I'm more satisfied with. So at this point you would have to go back and do the mirroring process again. I'm going to see if I can remember how we did it a moment ago. So we had these probably here. I'm just Alt right clicking and Alt Shift right clicking on all these, making sure to get all of them, H to hide them. We can hide the centerpiece with select linked, H to hide that. And we went all the way over to this one, so I'm going to do the same on this one. Select all these center lines. Also making sure you get this one behind, press H to hide that. And before you mess anything up, just make sure you save it. And then we're going to do select linked on this piece. H to hide that as well. Select everything else and delete it. Alt H. And now we can do Shift D, R72, and press enter, and then Shift R to repeat. But actually, well, that might be fine. I think we can just remove doubles. And it seems like our centerpiece is out of position. So I'm going to select this, do select linked, and snap it to here. Then bring it back a little further until it's slightly past, more like this, just slightly in front of it, similar to how we had it before. And then I just hid this circle here by selecting it, pressing H. And I think this turned out pretty good, so we're just going to save it with File Save. The only thing left to do at this point would be to make the bolts. You can make some real simple bolts if you want. Just go to Create, do Circle, 6 vertices. This is similar to how we did it before. Then RY90. Switch to median point, S to scale, then R30 to get the point at the top. Bring it up, S to scale. I believe this is the center point, one of the center points. So we're going to switch this to individual origins and grab it on the Z-axis. First, you need to make sure this is relatively centered. And then to perfectly center it, grab it on the Z-axis, hold Control and snap it to this point. Switch it back to median point. I think this is a relatively close size for this bolt here. I'm just going to move it into position to where the top of the bolt should be. And then I'm going to E to extrude, right click to cancel, bring it all the way to the back. You could snap it to the back just by grabbing it and snapping it to the back. Grab it on the X-axis, hold Control, and snap it to the back. Then Alt right click here, F to make a face, Control B, mouse wheel up once, left click, and there's our basic bolt. We can finish this off by joining these two by pressing J. Tab to object mode, go to tools, and you can turn smooth shading on. So there's our bolt, just like we made previously. Do select linked on this bolt, change it to 3D cursor, 3 for side view, Shift D, R72, press enter, and then Shift R to repeat this. And now we have the full set of bolts as well as everything else. So we can save this by going to File and Save. We apparently have a mistake on this rim. So if we do 3 for side view, tab for edit mode, and we alt right click on any of these edges, you'll notice it doesn't continue on. And usually what that means is you don't have all of your center points merged together, and that's exactly what the problem is. But it's not this point here, this one's fine. It's all these points up here that need to be merged together. So we're just going to select these two, Alt M at last. Do the same here and the same here. Fortunately, it's only these center areas, because what happened is apparently some of these got slid down further than others. Like even if you look at it, looks like this is a little further down perhaps than this. And that is what the problem is they didn't actually line up, so they didn't actually get merged together. So you just have to go through, and it should be this one here is the one. You can actually just click on I think perhaps let's see which one. Let me try to figure out which ones are the other ones that are affected. So it's this one here that needs to be fixed as well, so we're going to merge these. So it is this one and that one, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this needs to be merged as well. Then 1, 2, 3, this one. And lastly, this one right here. So while we're at it, I did notice we have like this shading here, which is kind of a problem. And that's really just because we pulled all this stuff back and now this is at an angle. And it's giving us problems here. So what you can do is Alt right click on these loops here. Go through and get all of them. And then once you have all of them, what we can do is switch this to median point. It actually doesn't matter, I guess. But what we want to do is try to match this curvature a bit better. So we want to pull these out slightly. You're still going to have a shading problem, but it won't be quite as bad if you get the correct angle so that this is more of a straight angle. It will look a lot nicer than what it did, even though there's still some minor imperfections. It still looks pretty much fine, so we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to go and save this now, so file and save.